the work whole hat, the challenges that we face today. And when you think about it,
Rosie O'Donnell thought she was the smartest person in the room until Jasmine Crockett answered back. It was the kind of moment where air shifts, the kind where every laugh, every smirk suddenly feels dangerous. Rosie leaned forward, her voice laced with the kind of sarcasm that could cut glass. She didn't ask a policy question, didn't challenge an argument. She went for the one insult that strips away dignity if it lands. Intelligence. Do you even understand what you're saying? Rosie fired, tilting her head as if she were scolding a child. The audience chuckled, soft at first, then bolder, like they were waiting for Jasmine to flinch. That's how these exchanges usually go. The celebrity drops the put down, the target hesitates. The narrative is written before they can even breathe. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She blinked once, twice, and in that pause the entire energy changed. Why would Rosie risk everything on one arrogant jab? Why place her reputation, her years of sharp-tongued bravado, on a single insult that might not land? It was arrogance disguised as confidence, and for a split second she seemed untouchable. The cameras zoomed in, catching every twitch, every muscle in Jasmine's face. Viewers at home leaned forward. People in the room shifted, expecting embarrassment, maybe even retreat. But Jasmine was writing another story in that silence, one no one had scripted. Her lips parted, the hint of a smile flickering, calm, deliberate, almost too calm. And in that tiny flicker was the promise of something bigger, sharper, unforgettable. She wasn't about to defend herself. She wasn't about to plead for respect. She was about to flip the stage upside down, because that's the danger of arrogance. It assumes the other side will play by the same rules. Rosie thought she had the power, thought mocking intellect would shrink her opponent, but what she hadn't realized was that the room wasn't waiting to laugh with her. It was waiting to see if Jasmine would rise. And when she did, what came out of her mouth didn't just answer back. It rewrote the balance of the room. It set fire to every smirk in the audience. It turned silence into thunder. What happened next froze the room. Before the first word was spoken, the stage already carried its own gravity. Rosie O'Donnell walked into the arena with a reputation sharpened by decades of bluntness. She had built her name on quick quips, heavy punches, the kind of comedy that could stop a dinner table cold. To her fans, she was fearless. To her critics, she was reckless. Either way, she thrived on spectacle, and this room was no different. Every tilt of her chin said she was ready to dominate. Across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, a woman often underestimated not because of her record, but because of how people perceived her. Young, stylish, Southern fire wrapped in calm articulation. Her sharpness was there for anyone who cared to notice, but too many brushed her off before she ever opened her mouth. That underestimation was both her curse and her weapon. It meant people leaned in expecting less, and were often startled when they received far more. This was no ordinary exchange. Beneath the lights and microphones, a deeper current ran, the cultural script that too often decides who gets to be seen as intelligent. Intelligence is supposed to be neutral, a measure of logic and clarity, but in public battle it is wielded like a blade. And for women, especially women of color, it is a weapon often turned against them before the fight even begins. Too emotional. Not serious. Out of her depth. Each phrase becomes a cage, each assumption in a bar. Rosie's insult then wasn't just another jab. It carried history, echoing decades of belittlement where women were told their place, told their value, told they weren't clever enough to sit at the table. She thought she was scoring points. What she was really doing was stepping into an arena charged with all that context, all that weight, all that unspoken history ready to snap back. The tension between them was more than personal. It was archetypal. Rosie embodying the arrogance of someone who assumes her wit is untouchable, mocking first and thinking later. Jasmine, embodying resilience and sharpness, knows that every word she utters will be dissected, knowing that restraint and timing are her true allies. It wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a clash of postures, mockery versus dignity, arrogance versus composure. And the stakes, they were far higher than a single exchange. Credibility was on the line. Rosie's image as a sharp cultural commentator could either hold firm or collapse under its own smugness. Jasmine's reputation, still rising, could either be tarnished by mockery or cemented by defiance. Beyond them, the viral court of public opinion stood ready. Clips would be sliced within minutes. Reactions would flood timelines. Careers could bend under the weight of a single exchange. Audiences crave moments that feel bigger than themselves. Battles where one sentence crystallizes a truth everyone has felt but never said out loud. This was one of those moments, and everyone in that room sensed it. Even if they couldn't yet name it, The laughter that followed Rosie's insult wasn't joy, it was nervous anticipation. 1,000 silent questions hung in the air. Would Jasmine retreat? Would she lash out? Or would she carve her place in history with one line? The lights burned hotter. The cameras tilted closer. Every tick of silence became heavier than the last, and in that silence, one fact became unavoidable: the stage had been set not by Rosie's arrogance, but by Jasmine's poise. The cameras were rolling, and the trap was set. Rosie O'Donnell had built her debating style like a fortress. Loud walls, theatrical flourishes, dismissive gates that kept her opponents on the defensive. She thrived on interruption, on turning questions into punchlines, on laughing the loudest so no one noticed the cracks underneath. To many, it looked like dominance. To Rosie, it felt like survival. If she could mock before she was mocked, dismiss before she was dismissed, then she was untouchable. For years, it worked. On talk shows, in interviews, even in heated cultural debates, she learned that audiences often mistake volume for authority and sarcasm for wisdom. Each barb landed, each smirk lingered, and opponents who weren't ready to spar with humor often folded under the glare of her timing. But there's an irony hidden in that kind of style. The very thing that makes it powerful, its speed, its sting, its refusal to pause, also makes it fragile. Because when met with composure, when the other side doesn't flinch or crumble, the performance begins to look desperate. Mockery needs an audience that laughs along. Dismissal requires an opponent who bows out. Without those, the fortress starts to wobble. And on this stage, Rosie didn't see it. She leaned into old habits, certain that her sharp tongue would cut just as cleanly as it always had. She assumed the room would bend the way rooms always had, that silence would work in her favor, that laughter would echo like applause. Instead, her strength was already betraying her. The louder she pressed, the more theatrical her digs became. The more obvious it was that she was waiting, needing a reaction. In her overconfidence, she couldn't see the trap forming around her. Rosie wasn't dismantling Jasmine Crockett. She was walking straight into her own downfall. Jasmine Crockett never walked into rooms as the favorite. From the start of her career, the whispers followed her. Too young, too polished, too direct. Critics labeled her sharp tone as anger, her confidence as arrogance, and her style as distraction. For some, her very presence seemed to invite dismissal before she even opened her mouth. And yet, beneath every headline and every careless critique, she carried something heavier. The expectation that she would fail unless she was flawless. That was the trap. Every sentence had to do more than argue. It had to justify her place. Every pause was judged, every gesture dissected. Others could stumble and recover. Jasmine had no such luxury, and when Rosie O'Donnell aimed at her intelligence, it wasn't just an insult. It was an attempt to erase the years she had spent proving, over and over, that she belonged. The stakes weren't measured in sound bites. They were measured in dignity. To remain silent would signal weakness. To respond recklessly would confirm the stereotype. She was balancing on a wire stretched tight over decades of expectation. Every eye in the room waiting to see if she would fall. Inside, the calculation wasn't rage, it was clarity. Rosie thought this was about wit, about who could mock louder. But Jasmine knew it was about something larger, the right to be taken seriously. And that right wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever been dismissed with a smirk. So when the moment came, she didn't just defend herself. She didn't just parry the insult. She turned the stage into something else entirely. And when pushed too far, Jasmine didn't just defend herself, she rewrote the script. The rhythm of the exchange began like a drumbeat, subtle at first, then louder, then pounding. Rosie O'Donnell leaned on interruption like a crutch, cutting across Jasmine's words with exaggerated sighs, rolling her eyes so wide the cameras caught them from every angle. Every time Jasmine began to form a thought, Rosie pounced, layering sarcasm over substance until the air felt heavy with ridicule. "You're not even listening to yourself," Rosie scoffed, shaking her head like a teacher correcting a child. The audience stirred. Some laughed nervously, others shifted in their seats. It was the kind of reaction Rosie thrived on, half discomfort, half amusement. The louder her tone grew, the more she believed she was winning. Jasmine, however, remained steady. Her posture didn't falter, her voice didn't strain. She allowed Rosie's interruptions to hang in the air like smoke, toxic but temporary. The silence after each dig spoke louder than any retort, and that silence unnerved people. Social media was already humming. Clips of Rosie's jabs started flashing across Twitter feeds, TikTok captions reading, "Is Rosie going too far?" Others cut Jasmine's calm expression into reaction memes, "Unbothered queen." The split-screen drama had left the room and entered millions of living rooms within minutes. Still, Rosie pressed harder. Her tone grew theatrical, almost desperate. "You know, it's amazing. You talk in circles and somehow think it makes sense. Do you even get the words coming out of your mouth? Gasps rippled through the audience. The laughter was thinning now, replaced with a discomfort no one wanted to admit aloud. Viewers could feel the imbalance shift. Rosie wasn't jabbing anymore, she was flailing, doubling down on a tactic that suddenly looked less like dominance and more like insecurity. Jasmine's restraint only heightened the suspense. Each pause, each measured breath felt like the drawing of a bowstring. People leaned forward, waiting for release, and yet she stayed quiet, building pressure without breaking. Each jab made viewers wonder, would Jasmine break or would she strike back? The tension hung like a storm cloud ready to split open. Rosie's voice sharpened again, slicing through the thick silence. Honestly, I don't think you even understand half the things you're saying. The words landed like a stone in water, sending ripples across the room. Questioning intelligence wasn't just a jab, it was the lowest blow. It wasn't about the argument anymore. It was about erasure, about telling someone they didn't belong in the conversation at all. The room went still. The chuckles died. The line between entertainment and humiliation had been crossed, and everyone knew it. Some held their breath, others stared at Jasmine, waiting to see if she would crumble. But Jasmine didn't move. Her eyes locked on Rosie's, unshaken, almost amused. For the first time, it wasn't Rosie who controlled the silence. It was Jasmine. The cameras caught every detail, the flicker of tension across Rosie's face, the nervous shifting in the crowd, the sudden hush that made every heartbeat feel audible. On social media, the clip began looping, captions flying in real time. Oh no, Rosie did not just say that. The suspense stretched, unbearable now, each second longer than the last. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were waiting to see if Jasmine would stay silent, waiting to see if she would snap, waiting for the comeback they didn't yet know was about to define the moment. And then Rosie crossed the line. Honestly, Rosie said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air, I don't think you even understand half the things you're saying. The words didn't just hang there. They stabbed, they lingered, they poisoned the silence. The room, once filled with awkward chuckles and shifting laughter, went dead still. You could feel the oxygen drain from the space. Intelligence, she had gone for the jugular. Not the argument, not the evidence. The person, the mind itself. Eyes darted toward Jasmine, some pitying, others bracing for collapse. Rosie leaned back, satisfied, as if the battle had ended with that line. She smirked like a victor, already raising her trophy. But the silence that followed wasn't applause. It was anticipation. It wasn't agreement. It was a collective breath being held. Jasmine blinked once, slowly. Her hands stayed folded, her body still, her eyes locked like a laser on Rosie. She didn't fidget, didn't rush. She let the weight of Rosie's insult grow heavy, almost unbearable. That silence, the one Rosie thought was victory, suddenly became Jasmine's stage. And then she spoke. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't snap. It cut with clarity. Calm. Deliberate, paced like a verdict. Rosie, she began, her tone low but commanding. If I didn't understand what I was saying, you wouldn't still be trying this hard to interrupt me. The words landed like a thunderclap. The crowd's collective gasp broke the silence. Someone in the back laughed. Too loud, too sharp, setting off a ripple of stunned chuckles that grew into cheers. Rosie's smirk faltered, her jaw stiffening as though she'd just been struck. But Jasmine wasn't finished. She leaned in slightly, her gaze unflinching. You keep questioning my intelligence, but here's the truth. You don't interrupt people who make no sense. You interrupt people you're afraid to let finish. The audience erupted. Applause, laughter, whistles. An avalanche of noise that drowned out the hollow echoes of Rosie's earlier smugness. Phones lit up, screens recording, red dots blinking. Clips that would circle the globe in hours were being born in that instant. Rosie's face tightened, caught between disbelief and anger. She opened her mouth to respond, but the sound was swallowed by the roar of validation in the room. For the first time, her voice wasn't the loudest. For the first time, she wasn't in control, and Jasmine knew it. She didn't need to yell, didn't need to pile insult on insult. Her calm was sharper than any shout. Her timing, her restraint, her unshakable delivery. Those were the weapons Rosie never anticipated. The reversal was complete. In less than 30 seconds, the entire balance of power had shifted. Rosie wasn't the dominator anymore, she was the spectacle. The audience wasn't laughing with her. They were laughing at her. On Twitter, hashtags ignited fag Jasmine clapback, Faye Rosie silenced. 5 legendary response. Within minutes, TikTok edits surfaced looping Jasmine's line with booming sound effects, captions flashing. "Chess is how you handle arrogance." Reaction videos multiplied. People clutching their chests, rewinding the moment, mouths wide with disbelief. The commentary was instant and merciless. Rosie tried it and Jasmine ended her career in 2 sentences. That's silence before the clapback. That's how legends are made. This belongs in the Hall of Fame of comebacks. Inside the room, the reactions played out in layers. Rosie's supporters shifted uncomfortably, their applause frozen in their throats. They had expected Jasmine to stammer, to falter, maybe even lash out. Instead, they had witnessed precision, a scalpel cutting through bluster. They were rattled, left with no footing. Meanwhile, Jasmine's side of the room rose like a tide, cheering, clapping, standing, and even. Some banged on tables, others snapped their fingers in approval. They weren't just supporting her, they were exalting her. This wasn't a defense anymore. This was a coronation. Rosie tried again, lifting her chin, waving her hand as if to brush off the impact. "Oh, please," she muttered, forcing a laugh. But the sound was thin, desperate, collapsing under the weight of its own hollowness. Against the echo of Jasmine's clarity, it sounded like static. The cameras caught it all. Rosie's falter, Jasmine's composure, the crowd's thunderous response. And in living rooms across the country, viewers leaned closer to their screens, whispering to themselves, did she really just flip it like that? What made the moment legendary wasn't just the words, it was the choreography of it all. The insult, the pause, the silent stretching, the calm delivery, the eruption that followed. Every beat had been played with cinematic perfection, though Jasmine hadn't scripted a thing. She had simply owned the moment, turning an attempted humiliation into a showcase of power. Rosie looked smaller now, not physically, but in presence. The louder she had been, the weaker she seemed in hindsight. Jasmine's quiet strength reframed everything, revealing Rosie's volume for what it was, insecurity dressed as dominance. And still, Jasmine sat poised, almost serene, as if to remind the world this was never about shouting. This was about truth. The ripple effect was irreversible. Rosie, once the center of the spectacle, was now the cautionary tale. Jasmine, underestimated at every turn, had just carved her name into cultural memory. The battle was no longer whether she belonged. It was whether anyone else could ever match the bar she had just set. Rosie had delivered the cutting insult. But Jasmine's comeback, that was the cut that ended the fight. The room didn't just shift, it snapped. What began as a clash of personalities was suddenly recast as something larger: arrogance versus intelligence, mockery versus substance. Rosie had stepped onto the stage with the confidence of someone who believed volume equaled victory. But now her strategy lay bare. She had mocked intellect while showing none of her own, reduced the battlefield to cheap barbs that dissolved under the weight of Jasmine's precision. Every time Rosie tried to regain her footing, the contrast only grew starker. Her laughter rang hollow, her quips fell flat, her trademark bluster, once her weapon, now looked like noise. The more she spoke, the more she exposed the hypocrisy. Here was a woman mocking intelligence, yet unable to wield it herself. Jasmine, by contrast, needed no theatrics. She sat steady, eyes unwavering, every word a scalpel. She didn't gloat, didn't need to. Her strength wasn't in crushing Rosie, it was in elevating the standard. She represented substance in its purest form, calm, sharp, dignified. And the crowd knew it. The emotional tide turned in visible waves. At first, the audience's faces had been tight with anger, bristling at Rosie's attack, hearts thudding in collective indignation. Then came the eruption of relief, the satisfaction of seeing arrogance punctured by truth. Now, in the aftermath, something deeper settled in: admiration. Jasmine hadn't just survived, she had triumphed with elegance. On social media, the narrative crystallized. Clips replayed with captions that drew the moral line: arrogance collapses, intelligence stands tall. Memes mocked Rosie, but tributes celebrated Jasmine. Commentators declared the moment a textbook example of composure under fire, of wit used as a shield and sword, and still Rosie lingered, trying to claw back control. She leaned forward, voice rising again, desperate to recapture the laughter that once followed her. But the audience no longer leaned in. They leaned away. They weren't angry anymore. They were unmoved. She had lost the room, and worse, she had lost the story. Jasmine, though, didn't even need the final word. She had already framed the debate without trying. Her intelligence wasn't a thing to be proven anymore. It was undeniable, immortalized in that comeback. Rosie's arrogance had exposed itself as weakness. Jasmine's dignity had revealed itself as power. And the whiplash was complete. Rosie entered as the dominant voice, but left as the cautionary tale. Jasmine entered underestimated, but left elevated beyond the stage. The clash had turned moral, and the verdict was clear: arrogance collapses, dignity survives. When the dust settled, Rosie's energy was gone. The swagger that once filled every inch of the stage seemed to drain from her shoulders, her laughter a faint echo of what it had been. She shifted in her seat, searching for the rhythm that had carried her through countless clashes before. But the rhythm was gone, stolen by a single moment that had already taken flight beyond the room. Jasmine didn't need to press her advantage. She didn't need another line or a final flourish. She simply gathered her notes, rose with composure, and walked out with the same calm that had defined her all along. Cameras followed her exit, but what they captured wasn't a retreat. It was a coronation. The room, once Rosie's stage, now felt like Jasmine's victory lap. In the aftermath, reflections spread like wildfire. Commentators called it a symbolic win for resilience, a reminder that dignity outlasts mockery, that intelligence shines brightest when tested under pressure. Clips replayed the exact moment of reversal, slowed down, remixed, reframed. Each angle told the same truth. Rosie's arrogance had collapsed in real time, and Jasmine's poise had written the new narrative. The audience takeaway was simple, repeated in post after post. Mockery crumbles in the face of calm intelligence. It wasn't just a line. It was the lesson etched into the cultural memory of that night. And then came the validation layer. On Twitter, now X, hashtags trended within hours. Faye legendary clapback, for Jasmine wins, Faye arrogance collapsed. TikTok edits looped her comeback with cinematic music, titles flashing. The moment the room froze. YouTube reaction channels uploaded instant takes, their thumbnails wide-eyed with captions screaming, "She destroyed Rosie O'Donnell." The ripple effect wasn't just about entertainment. It was about meaning. Viewers across the spectrum pointed to Jasmine as proof that restraint could be more powerful than rage, that clarity could cut deeper than noise. Parents shared the clip with their kids, calling it a masterclass in handling bullies. Activists cited it as an emblem of standing tall in the face of dismissal. Even those who had come expecting fireworks from Rosie admitted the truth. The win was Jasmine's. And it wasn't just about the words. It was about the balance of the entire encounter. She hadn't merely defended herself, she had shifted the cultural script. The narrative closed itself with elegance. Arrogance burns hot, but burns out quickly. Composure endures. Jasmine didn't just answer back, she reset the bar. And as the headlines declared victory and the hashtags cemented her legend, one thought echoed everywhere: this wasn't just a clapback. It was a cultural turning point. Rosie O'Donnell questioned Jasmine Crockett's intelligence, but it was Jasmine's comeback that the world remembers. That single moment didn't just shift a debate, it reshaped the balance of power in front of millions. A question meant to belittle instead became the spark for a legendary response. And now, the question turns to you. If you were in that room, whose side would you have taken? Did Rosie's arrogance make you wince, or did Jasmine's calm leave you in awe? Was this the coldest comeback of the year, or just the beginning of something even greater? Drop your reaction below, because these moments aren't just battles between personalities, they're lessons for all of us. Every comment, every share, every voice adds to the conversation about dignity, wit, and the power of holding your ground. If you believe calm will always crush chaos, hit subscribe. If you believe resilience deserves to trend louder than arrogance, share this story. Join the movement that refuses to let mockery win. And remember, if one clapback can silence Rosie O'Donnell, what happens when Jasmine faces her next challenger?